about CE5 and extraterrestrial contact, download my new book, now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and 14 other platforms. Book authored by Donald Ledesma. CE5, Frequencies of Contact.
Strand podcast.
The amount of evidence for the reality of the Allagash abductions for any other subject, any mundane subject, in a court of law, you could hang a person probably. But because of the bizarre nature of the case, that's not going to happen. People aren't going to accept that evidence, although the evidence is there.
Do you believe in aliens or UFOs?
I do now. I definitely do now.
I believe in it now because I've seen it and I know what I saw.
Everybody, welcome to this episode of Alien Strand Podcast. I'm your host, Donald Ledesma, and welcome to today's show. Yep. You know, I had y'all listened to the last podcast that I had. I was talking about how people sometimes when they get stressed out, you know, or they're just too deep into UFOs, extraterrestrials, all that good stuff, right? Sometimes you get pulled in way too much, right? And then you have to back off just for a little bit, right? And that's what I do every once in a while. So I did it. Yeah, I had to. And then I had other things to do as well. So I'm sorry I didn't get to get the last audio podcast out to you guys. You know, I was thinking about it. I tried. I was like, man, I want to do it. But my mind was not there. You know, I was like, I had my mind on other things. You know, it happens, man. Family stuff. You get it. You get it. You guys are family. But if you're new to Alien Strand Podcast, welcome to Alien Strand Podcast, where you can listen to us in 26 to 28 platforms of audio. Yeah, tonight's audio. So you can listen to us on, Spotify, CastBox, iTunes, YouTube, Amazon. You can even ask Alexa to play some Alien Strand Podcast, and it will. All right, so just check that out, you know, and don't forget to watch our films, The Middle. They're still out there on Tubi TV and Roku. Yeah, it's still on Roku. The Middle Part 1 and The Middle Part 2 is out there still. You can catch it on Amazon Prime too. If you want to pay for less commercials, you know, you don't have to watch commercials. You can watch right through it. I really appreciate everybody that's been watching it still. You know, the first movie's been going on for about 3 years now, and I can't believe that much time has passed by. What's going on, man? You know, it's going by so fast. You know, by the time you know it, you're 12, you're 20, you're 40. And then you're 50, right? So, and that's where I'm at right now, right? So I was like, okay, man, this time has flew by. And, you know, I had a great time shooting those films, and I hope you guys go check those out. Well, I'm still working on the last one. You know, that's when I do have time. I'll do a little editing as much as I can, and I'm going to be on a few podcasts here coming up pretty soon myself, on other people's podcasts. I'll be announcing that as well, you know, but welcome to Alien Strand Podcast. If you guys are driving, listening, truck drivers out there, thank you guys for being on the road and delivering all the goodies that we need for our bellies, right? Some steaks, man, I love me a good steak. steak, right? So these guys get to go out there all on the road all night long, and they deliver our grocery stores, and they listen to Alien Strand podcasts all over the world. That's where everybody listens to the show. Why? Because they're interested in ufology, because that's what Alien Strand is about. It's about ufology, right? What's ufology? Well, we follow UFOs, we follow extraterrestrials, and everything else in between, right? But mainly our focus is about 90% of extraterrestrials. Believe it or not, if you've listened to all these shows, I have 230. You can listen to a lot of them on Patreon. Don't forget to go to Patreon, man. And thank you guys for being the new subscribers to Patreon and being free subscribers as well. You can go on there for free. You don't have to pay. But if you do get on Patreon, go check out. There's a special one I did there for David Wilcock, and that's only for Patreon members that are paid. All right. And if you are a paid subscriber of Patreon, which is $5 a month, you get a lot of books to download. I got 3 or 4 books there for you to download for free. They're yours, man, and you get to download, read them as much as you want. They're all about UFOs, a lot of information there, and I have some top secret stuff there that you can get as well, and some pretty good books like the Pulsar Project. That is a really, really good book, and it's very short. It's a very short book, probably about 50 pages or so, but it's very informative because it was written by a scientist in the late 80s, early 90s, who had been actually studying extraterrestrials, and he was actually had physical, how do you say this? Dissections of extraterrestrials, right? So he knew the ins and outs of extraterrestrials. He knows the inside of their bodies, outside of the bodies, and different kind of species. So in that book, he names about maybe 10, 15 different kind of species, which is the main species of extraterrestrial that they mainly had contact in the earlier years, right? These are the ones that have contact with civilization, us, United States, human beings, or other countries as well. But this is what he documented and what their biology it consists of, right? And their blood molecules, everything that's in there of a pathologist, anything like that. Everything is in there in that book. You can look at what they eat, how they consume their food. I mean, this is how I learned a lot about extraterrestrials. And it's not just about the UFO, right? I love the UFO. I love the different kinds of UFO that are out there. But, we have to learn about the extraterrestrial itself, the pilot that's driving this craft. And, as much as I've been talking on Alien Strand podcast since 2019, when I first started. My first 10 are horrible, but it's okay. It is what it is. But I was just getting going in podcasting right now. Everybody's doing it. Everybody, the grandmothers are podcasting, right? So everybody wants to podcast now. Everybody wants to talk about UFOs, but nobody is like Alien Strand. I'm going to tell you that right now. So because they're just learning. And which is fine. It's great informative stuff that other podcasts have out there. So don't get me wrong. Go check those other podcasts out as well, because there's sometimes they have really good guests on that will give you a lot of information that you need to know about UFOs, extraterrestrials, even intermittent dimensions, things like that, right? And it kind of gets your brain fired up like it does with me, because right now I'm taking a sip of Joe, right? Yeah, what is that? Coffee. And that's what I drink right now to have my audio podcast. I grind my own coffee. I love grinding. And people who love coffee, there's a lot of people that don't. I love coffee. But when you grind your own bean, man, like right then and there, and you make yourself a fresh cup, oh my God. It's like heaven, man. It just fires up everything in your brain, right? But anyway, it's just that's what I like doing, and doing these audio podcasts so that we can get it out there. But I am going to have a video podcast as well. I am. Okay, I promise. I'm going to have it out tomorrow for Patreon only, and then I'm going to have an actual one for Rumble, and that's going to be for everybody. But tomorrow will be for Patreon only. Go check that out. If you are not a Patreon member, just join. You can join for free. Go check that out. But paid members get first dibs on everything, so they get to watch these podcasts that are not on other platforms. You're only going to see it there. The special podcast I only do for Patreon, that's only for them. Nobody else gets to hear it, or nobody gets to see it. Sometimes you get to hear me raw. And I'll talk raw. Sometimes I might cuss a little bit, but hey, that's just who I am. And some things, you get frustrated. I get it, but that's just me. But anyway, today's podcast is going to be pretty important. I was thinking about it, and I kept on hearing the terminology. Hold on. Kept on hearing the terminology of ultra-dimensional, right? And I was like, ultra-dimensional, I've heard that over and over and over. And there's ultra-terrestrials, right, as well. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And if you don't know what it is, I'm going to give you the definition here in a minute. But, I just want you guys to understand what's in store for this podcast tonight. We're just going to go beyond our standard, what we regularly do with extraterrestrials and our hypothesis on different different studies and the way I think about extraterrestrials and the way you think about extraterrestrials. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into controversial and just a little bit of intellectual ideas, right, of ufology and consciousness, right? Because I was talking about consciousness for a while there, and because that is a part of you. You are consciousness, and consciousness lives around us. It even lives in water, and that was the most the most precious thing that people don't understand, how water has consciousness. You don't even know, but it does. It reflects everything that's out there, right? And when I went to San Antonio this past weekend, and I went to go see my daughter, right? And, we were talking about it. We're talking about how people, when they get cremated, and some people go, they take their loved ones out to sea. And then my daughter turns around and she tells me, well, Dad, she goes, it's kind of like, she goes, water is life. Water is everything. And water has consciousness. And why not put somebody in the water? Because they're going to live on forever within the ocean, right? And you get to feel them everywhere you go, right? And, and I looked at her and I said, wow, where'd you get that from? Yo, Daddy. Anyway, so, we had a moment there, and I was very impressed by what she had said, because it's true. You can, they made studies of water and how it affects. You can actually make images of inside of water. They've gotten images of ice or just thinking about something inside of water, right? So how does water do that? Water has to have some kind of consciousness. Well, in your body as well, you have plenty of water in there, right? So yeah, why not have consciousness? And, with this ultra-terrestrial theory that I was going to talk about today, what if the UFOs that we see out there are not visitors, let's just say from another planet or another universe or another galaxy, right? But what if they've always been here on Earth and they're monitoring every single thing we do, right? Why not think about it that way? That is the ultra-terrestrial, right? And the ultra-dimensional too. You gotta think about it that way. And it's kind of it's different, because we're so used to saying extraterrestrial, interdimensional, but now there's ultra-dimensional, ultra-terrestrial, right? But what if these ultra-dimensional or terrestrial intelligence have been evolving alongside of us, humanity, right? Humans. What if? And that's what gets me thinking sometimes. What if they're hiding under our oceans as well, right? Or underground. We always see these UFOs or UAPs hovering around mountains, volcanoes. Some, it's just deep beneath the earth that we talk about. And we see videos of these things over and over and over. Or what if they just are around us in dimensions we just barely don't understand, right? It's a different kind of consciousness that we cannot tap into or don't know anything about, right? We're just barely starting to break the surface of the interdimensional, extraterrestrial. Why? I think because they're just more intelligence officers and more people that have seen and witnessed these things are starting to come out more and more, and they're giving us more information they're giving us little tiny breadcrumbs. I see it this way, right? As breadcrumbs of us finding out. And when we talk about extraterrestrials and we talk about other people's work, was this work and everything we're saying correct? Or are we still just guessing, right, of what these things are, or how they react, or how they work? I'm talking about the UFOs, the ships, things like that, and how they come into our world, right? Or are they from another galaxy? I mean, that's the deep part of the way we're going to talk about tonight, ultradimensional or ultra-terrestrial. We're going to talk about the definitions. We're going to talk about ancient civilizations and a little bit of our history. And then we're going to talk about why our oceans are the UAP hotspots, where people will be talking about these for a long time, but nobody really discusses the oceans or the UAP activity that happens below the oceans. It's always above our earth, right? Or above our heads, sky. We're going to talk about military encounters that they had beneath the sea as well. Consciousness. We're going to talk about interdimensional theories as well. Historical sightings. And, of course, what we talked about last time, nuclear monitoring incidents. We know that has happened. And then we're going to just touch base on what this means for humanity if they're monitoring us as we're here. But before we go forward, let's take a couple of minutes. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back after this message.
Whispers ride the wind like ghosts. Mountains hum a song I can't decode. Sky splits open wide, wide, wide. Who's watching from the other side? Drums in my chest beat slow. Do they hear? Do they know? Sky gods thunder, sky
Alien Strand Podcast.
Sky gods cry, watching us crawl while they fly. Stars blink like ancient eyes, patterns tracing truths and lies.
All right, welcome back to the show. Hope you guys are enjoying today's podcast here on Alien Strand. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you're listening to us on YouTube or any of those other platforms. All right. Hope you guys are having a lot of information that's going to be coming from this podcast today, because we're going to all learn together, right? We're going to learn exactly together of what's been going on under the earth, right? Or under the ocean. So let's turn the lights down just a little bit and let's dive a little deeper, right? So what is the term ultra-terrestrial? What is ultra-terrestrial? Well, the term ultra-terrestrial became widely known through a paranormal researcher. His name is John Keel. John Keel, especially in his book in 1975. It's called, you remember this one, The Mothman Prophecies, all right? So you remember the movie as well. I love the film. As strange as it was, but it gave us a lot of insights of what was happening, right? But he wrote this book, and this is where the terminology came from. And he proposed something kind of radical about it, right? So he argued that the UFO phenomenon may not be an extraterrestrial spacecraft from a distant planet, but instead, he kind of believed that there were manifestations of intelligence native to Earth. In other words, they'd been here for such a long time, right? So that's why the film was kind of strange. It had a general concept of this man with big eyes, and he kind of looked like a moth, big old wings, and every time he showed up, that there was something, it was giving the people a number of what was about to happen on this bridge, and he was giving them the number. They didn't know what that was at the time, but it was prophesizing something that was going to happen within a week or so, right? In the film or in the book. But he connected this to Earth and like other dimensions, right? In other words, like the ultra-dimensional or terrestrial could be interdimensional. It could be ancient or non-human as well, right? So just think about that for a minute. Interdimensional, ancient, or non-human. So that just means something has been here on this Earth long before we did. And possibly hidden in the earth or in the oceans, right? And what if this being, or whatever it is capable of manipulating like our certain perception of consciousness? We were going to talk about that today. Because what if it can change things in our consciousness to make us perceive things differently? In other words, change things. Don't we think about extraterrestrials in that sense, because they can change the factor of how you're thinking of what you're seeing, or they can stop time, right? In our consciousness. But what if they have total control of that, and they can see beyond the future and the past, right? So why not be like a extraterrestrial or an ultra terrestrial? But what if the theory is that they can actually assume themselves as a physical spacecraft, and they're crossing galaxies, right? Like the ultra-dimensional terrestrial theory, how it suggests that this is what it does, right? We've always thought about UFOs and crafts coming from different galaxies. Yes. What if not? But if they were from here, they may phase out in and out of our reality. In other words, being in a different dimension, but being here, almost like ghosts or demons or things like that, right? Where we see different videos and things that are beyond our reality of things of comprehension, right? And they may have existed way before human civilizations, right? And you have to think about it that way, right? What if these civilizations were here way before us, or before the Neanderthalic period? What if the Young Dryas impact was something that happened later, way later, when they were already here, long before that, right? And what if they influenced maybe religions or myths or encounters? In other words, what people were seeing back in the days. What if? And then we notice now how they operate as like observers of some sort. of humanity, right? Because they're out there just checking us out with these spheres. We're finding these that way. Okay, if you remember the Berger sphere, they carbon dated it back 12,000 years old. That metal is. So remember that sphere they found that came down? That's where they carbon dated that, right? So that is older than man, supposedly. Well, beyond our recordings of man. So in other words, this theory that we talk about of ancient civilizations, right? It can, how it manifests itself with the Anunnaki, right? Let's just say it that way, or ancient gods, or angels and demons, right? And then, of course, we have the fairies in the European folklore, where they talk about, fairies and trolls and all that other different stuff. The jinn and Middle Eastern traditions, right? That is a demon of some sort. And then when we hear about like the indigenous peoples that were here way before us, in other words, the natives as well, they talk about sky beings, right? That came down and they were friends with. So where did all these ideas come from? I think it came from them actually, as far as the indigenous people, they were actually having contact with extraterrestrials, or what we call ultra-terrestrials, right? And like I said before, thousands and thousands of years they were describing these beings descending from the sky, right? And they were emerging, some were even emerging from water as well, right? So this is where we're getting this theory from. People don't talk about it as much. And that's what we're going after, the truth, right? As far as our governments, militaries, things that were hidden from the people. I get that. I get it, right? But we want to dive deeper into what these things are. Not just, we know that they exist. And we know that all these cultures from the past that we have had, they've just all called them different names, right? On these lost civilizations that we've had with pre-human intelligence. In other words, where did all this start from? Where did all this begin? Where it began for us as humans, where we started actually recording events, right? And local scientists, or just scientists in general, they just kind of think of modern civilization, us, human beings, right? That we roughly were about 6,000 years old, right? Hominids. That we walk upright, everything like that, and we became human around 6,000 years ago, right? So if you kind of think about stories of our religions and the biblical aspects of everything was about 2,000 to almost 2,500 years ago, or some sort like that, and we're looking at 6,000 years. So that's probably about another 3,500 years prior to that peoples were existing in humans' civilizations. In other words, we were coming together and forming as humans. And maybe we were already, but what if there was something else way before that? Of course, we had sites that were with pre-civilizations. In other words, Göbekli Tepe, right? Pumapunku. And then we have the Great Pyramids of Giza out there that have been raising a lot of questions about ancient engineering, right? We've been talking about that and their capabilities of how did they do that, man? And then Göbekli Tepe, it kind of dates back 11,000 years almost, right? So that kind of rewrites history a little bit, because if that was 11,000 years, now scientists are saying human beings were made, we were starting barely getting together 6,000 years ago. Wait a minute. Hello. So there's still 5,000 years before that date, right? That civilizations existed. You have to think about that just for a minute. And it kind of rewrites history a little bit. So, in other words, humanity, we're supposed to be kind of primitive at the time, right? We're like hunter-gatherers during the period, kind of making fire and of course, eating meat and everything that we plants, everything that we could to evolve. But yet, even at the Göbekli Tepe, from way before that, the stones kind of align themselves with astronomy, right? In other words, like with the constellations, right, of the stars. So they knew science before that. Where did that come from? So there's another theory called the Silurian hypothesis, proposed in 2018 by scientists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt. And their theory, it pretty much asks, if an advanced industrial civilization existed millions of years ago, would we even detect it today? But most evidence would appear, though, of course, through all that time, we have erosion, tectonic shifts, oceanic recycling, even ice ages that happen. So, yeah, I've always stated this. I don't know how many times I've said this, but I feel that everything's buried, man. Because if you think about the beginning of, let's just say, the beginning of Earth, 3 or 4 billion years ago, when the planet was barely getting together, another billion years went by, whatever. So we have volcanoes, everything that's starting to make the land, and of course we have the tectonic plates that are starting to shift, and then we have volcanoes, right? What do volcanoes do? They erupt, right? So they throw magma all up in the air, and it just makes more of a foundation, right? So it buries things underneath, and it keeps burying things more and more and more, and the tectonic plates start shifting even more. So now we have more dirt on top of dirt, right? So of course, this is where that theory comes from, that we're not going to find that because of evolution, not of modern man, but the evolution of the earth, where this is just the way the earth moves and how it moves forward, right? How things are. But just imagine of civilizations surviving underground or underwater. So if you think about all those shifts, volcanic eruptions, everything that's going on around the earth, where would be the best place for an ultra terrestrial to be? Will be underground or underwater, because the survival rate will be larger and they'll be able to be around longer, right? And that's a thought process within itself. That's just a whole story within itself. It can go different ways on that. But just imagine if their technology was already advanced way before that, before all that even happened a billion years ago, let's just say. And they've been here. This is where this theory comes from. Let's take a quick 5 minutes, pay the bills. We'll be back after this message.
Will something watching. Shapes in the daylight, parked up in the clouds above town. Metal in the sunshine, then the thunder rolls and
Alien Strand Podcast.
but it never feels the same. Clouds full of secrets, hiding in the white and gray. They wait till we're sleeping to pull us through the Milky Way. If I wake up screaming, will they let me keep my name? Clouds full of secrets and nothing will look the same. Oh.
All right, welcome back to Alien Strand Podcast. I hope you guys are enjoying the show and learning a little bit, right? You know, it just kind of gives you something to think about, right? What we've been talking about here on this major topic, right? And that's what people don't really talk about as much, right? And why don't they not talk about it? I don't know. You know, and it's deeper than it's been, but of course through the History Channel and Ancient Aliens and all that good stuff, right? We get a lot of information from what they were actually saying, and they always talked about ancient civilizations, right? And could it have been, you know, just something that they were already telling us, but we weren't really listening. We're kind of listening, but not as much. But what if all that stuff was true? That's what I'm trying to bring here to the table here on Alien Strand and this topic today with ultradimensionals, right? And you know, we talked about if these people were, or these beings were advanced beyond us technologically, right? And we know probably yes, because they're still here, right? And we know that they've been around for such a long time. Wes, we talked about the Burgosphere, right? How old it is and how it was carbonated and how it's still alive and how it's still functioning, right? That this thing is still firing up. It doesn't move anywhere. It's just sitting in place, but it's alive. And I'm sure they put that thing away where other people would not get a hold of it. And then when we imagine their technology and imagine why they chose isolation from us. And then they watch us, humanity, in cycles of war, environmental collapse, or just our technology as it accelerates just a little bit as we keep going forward because we're getting a hold of these crafts, right? And I think this is how or why our technology has excelled to where it is today because of that. And this is my personal opinion, but at this state, it should be thinking that way. We should be, because there's no damn way we would have gone as far as we could have if we didn't have any of that. We'd still be way in the back, maybe still with some steam engines, you know what I mean? So who knows? Who knows if we would have evolved faster, or we would have still been, maybe like today, we would have probably been in the 70s, just to put it to you that way, right? So, and then we think about the how this isolation and why they kept themselves away, and then we think about their the theory of ultra-terrestrial, right, and why it becomes a little terrifying and sometimes. And we always think why the aliens never arrived or why they didn't land, you know. You know why? Because they never left. They've always been here, right? And what if they been in our oceans this whole time? Like I said, where is the best place to be hiding is in the ocean. So we have these UAP hotspots, right? So now they move to the most active areas of UAP investigations, which is the Earth's oceans. We all know that, right? So over 70% of the Earth is covered in water. And in my town, we have a water shortage. We live right next to the ocean. Where does that come from? I don't get that. You see how far back we are? We think we're forward, but we actually are not. Our thought process is not there yet. Humanity we have mapped less ocean floor than the surface of Mars, right? We know everything about Mars, everything in and out, even its ice caps, but we don't know a darn crap thing about our oceans. But what if you really think about this, why not study the oceans? Why not? I know we can't go deep because it's the pressures are too high and it's very dangerous. I get that. But in space, isn't it a little more dangerous as well? Right? They've managed to master that part, but they haven't managed to master pressure yet. So a lot of researchers or scientists, that believe in UAPs or the phenomena, they just believe that the oceans, that these UAPs or extraterrestrials or ultra-terrestrials, they use the oceans as concealment, right? And then they have a little bit more energy stability as far as their craft. Maybe it just flies better, or it glides better in the oceans, or maybe it uses less propulsion in the ocean, or maybe it uses the water just to stay powered, or it could use for electromagnetic shielding as well, right? And there's a lot of hidden access points. Of course, there's going to be all over our ocean floors. Of course, we knew that one up there by, where was that? It was in California or Mexico. Oh, closer to Mexico. It was that shaft that was down there that Google Maps covered up, right? So we all knew about that one, and they covered it up. Why? Talking about why, well, the military has repeatedly documented objects, right? In other words, they're always documenting these objects coming in and out of the oceans, entering the oceans, and we've already seen it with Fravor, all these pilots that have caught these on video, and we had the USS Nimitz, where the Tic Tac, of course, we talked about the last time with Fravor, and his co-pilot Alex Dietrich was with him, right? So, and then they reported that this thing had no wings, it had no visible propulsion, it had instantaneously accelerated in these speeds unbelieved by anybody or even humanity could even build, because the movement was from 80,000 feet to 1 foot in a second, right? Of what does that, right? And then when they saw this craft from the Nimitz, they said that the water beneath the ocean had appeared to be churning violently, as if something massive existed below the surface. In other words, where this Tic Tac came out of, there was something bigger below the ocean, where this thing popped out of. This is a detail that's overlooked, right, by a lot of people. Something larger was under that ocean. And then we have another major hotspot, which is the Atlantic Ocean, right near Puerto Rico, right? So there's, for years, that the military has been monitoring that area. They've tracked many, numerous unidentified aerial phenomenon that's been coming out of the water. And it comes out of the water without slowing down. There's no splash, no impact, no sonic booms, right? And they call these things USOs, what we've talked about before, which is unidentified submerged objects, right? So there's a lot of hotspots out there. Catalina Island, Baja California, Hawaii, even the Japan trenches, right? So the Pacific Ocean contains a lot of unexplored depths. In other words, it's deep, right? So why not hide there? Why not? And in these regions, they've actually had like electromagnetic anomalies that have been reported in those areas for many years. The Arctic Ocean. You know, that place has melting ice exposure, right? So recently, it has a lot of unexplained sonar readings as well. In other words, something is going by these submarines underwater at high speeds, and they don't know what the hell it is. The Indian Ocean, right? And there's a lot of theories about the Indian Ocean where they think there's like underwater structures, or some believe that there's like bases or observation stations, maybe, you know, or entrances under the system, under the ground, right, under the ocean. So that's why we always talked about the ocean. Why aren't we studying as much as we know about Mars? Maybe because they don't want to. Maybe it's because they know, right? So they know something's down there, and they're not going to do anything about it. And that's my main concern about just that theory itself. And of course, if these ultra-dimensional beings are out there monitoring us, they're monitoring our nuclear facilities, our silos, right? They're nuclear submarines, right? Because they're out there in the Indian Ocean, all over the place, right? And they're going to atomic research sites. So they're monitoring us, you know, when these things have been around these nuclear silos. And it's happened. Like I said, I talked about this last time. So one of the most cases that they talked about was called the Malmstorm Air Force Base, right? And the personnel claimed that UFOs appeared over missile facilities and allegedly disabled nuclear weapon systems, right? And the witnesses that were there were Robert Salas, who publicly described missiles shutting down during UFO encounters. And why do you think these advanced intelligence beings, why would they monitor nuclear weapons? Well, maybe they think we reached a dangerous threshold of some sort. In other words, where they think, hey, these people are crazy. They're going to kill themselves. Or maybe the nuclear detonations may affect the dimensions in the time, right? If you kind of think about it that way, it might. And what if they're just protecting Earth itself? And they might just be monitoring us like a developing species of some sort, like the way we monitor animals in zoos. They're probably doing the exactly same thing to us. And you have to think about this real carefully. So our civilization, really in reality, remember when we were talking about this, how it accelerated, right? How our technologies accelerated and when. And after World War II, after the atomic bomb, after radar technology, and then we have satellite systems, all these things became rapidly accelerated. Every single thing. And every single one of these things, if you think about this, World War II, the atomic bomb, radar technology, satellite systems, all that has to do, every single one of those topics has to do with war, right? Or a protection of some sort. And did we even cross the line? That's what I'm thinking about. Have we crossed the line with them already? In other words, where they're thinking that, what if the ultra-terrestrials, they just kind of think of us more like they're becoming more active because of it. In other words, they're monitoring us more and more and more. So now we're seeing more extraterrestrials and UFOs. Possibility. I think so. Let's take a quick 5. We'll be back after these messages.
Static screen, blue glow on my face, redacted pages all over the place. They said weather balloon over grainy tape, but the farmer found glass in a perfect shape. Desert sand turned to glass in a silent flash. Man in suits at his door, talking fast, talking trash. Tell me what you're hiding in the sky. All these years of looking up at lights.
Alien Strand Podcast.
Tell me what you're hiding in the sky. Flight logs missing, radar goes blind. Pilots draw circles, they call them in their minds. Airbase lights flick.
All right, welcome back to the show. Hope you guys are enjoying Alien Strand Podcast. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, man. Whatever audio you're listening to us on, hope you guys enjoy the music as well. And just give us some thumbs up, man. Some hearts on iHeartRadio. Follow us. Share this podcast with people you think that would find this podcast, educational, right, or just interesting to listen to. I think it's very. Very educational. Me personally, I like talking to people about it and just giving them a lot of information, because that's what we need, is a lot more information on UFOs and UAPs, especially when you want to ask questions now that it's the hottest topic out there, right? We know that already. We know it's a super, super hot topic, and we always try to get as many people involved as possible as the disclosure comes along. And this is part of disclosure, right? Ultra-terrestrial, man, it's what it is, right? And then we're going to talk a little bit about consciousness now. So I want to speak directly to you guys, because this topic is just a little bit bigger than UFOs sometimes. The ultra-terrestrial theory, sometimes you got to think about it, and you got to ask this question, right? To us, it's like, is this some sort of reality, right? Or is this some kind of consciousness? Or is this perception itself of what the ultra-terrestrial theory really is? And then, because as I've talked to many of my guests on the shows, and even the people that have been on my films, I always ask them questions about telepathic communication of some sort, or dreams, or things that happen to them on the level to where they're trying to communicate with the extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial, or the ultra-dimensional, and I always ask them, hey man, did you have any missing time? Did you experience any kind of altered states of some sort, right? Some things of non-reality, right? Where it seems like you were just in a different place or in a different world. or did you have dreams that proceeded with more sightings? And a lot of this is yes, and yes, right? Because in my films, they all talk about it, every single one of them. And they all go through some kind of emotional manipulation of some sort, right? Some sort of PTSD, and why do they experience this, right? It's because the phenomenon that they're experiencing may interact with consciousness itself. In other words, it's trying to interact with us as we're awake, right? As being awakened. So we have physicist Jacques Vallée propose that the UFO phenomenon behaves more like a control system than an extraterrestrial visitation. In other words, because it controls you. And he says it's a system designed to influence human belief of evolution. So at that point, it just kind of changes everything, right? Doesn't it? When you start thinking about it that way, or the way he thinks about it that way. So if consciousness is connected to reality, and it just kind of makes us more deeply than we understand. In other words, the ultra-terrestrials, sometimes, you kind of think about it as like, well, they might not travel physically, but they come across to us through reality or through frequencies or through dimensions or fields of consciousness, because that's what we talked about a lot. We always talked about a lot of frequencies, right? How it works through, of course, these ancient practices that this is where we build the CE5 practice, because it's actually an ancient practice, if you think about it, with meditation, trance states as well, right? Ritual contact of some sort, or altered awareness, right? So this is a lot of things that they experience in ancient cultures, but sometimes they used something to induce the altered awareness or the ritual contact or trance states. In other words, they used a chemical to put them in a deeper state of consciousness or subconsciousness, to where they were in the middle of being awake and asleep, but they were experiencing things that weren't supposed to be experienced, right? So maybe this is where a lot of these things happened, where we have these practices that we do today, right? Makes sense to me. So, and then of course our modern experiencers today, they report similar encounters today, right? So, in other words, you guys out there, you should understand that in this subject of ultra-terrestrials, right? It does like an intersection, right? In other words, it intersect, in other words, with quantum theory, and it intersects with spirituality, psychology, sometimes with military secrecy, we already know that, and mythology, right? So this is how this goes with us, and it intersects how we redeem, or how our consciousness reacts to ultradimensionals or ultra-terrestrials, right? So, in this phenomenon that we usually talk about, it kind of brings us back to the ancient times, right? Where we talked about this, right? Where people saw gods back then because they didn't know what things were, so they had to make something of what they were. In the Middle Ages, they saw people as demons. And then today, people see these advanced craft as non-human intelligence, right? And sometimes these things do change appearance. But the intelligence behind this craft, it still remains the same. So it acts the same way, right? Talking about the UFO, the UAP, the USO. It all acts exactly and flies exactly the same, right? That doesn't change. So what if there is an underwater base? Well, of course, we talked about these possible locations: Catalina Island, Guadalupe Island, Puerto Rico Trench, and the Antarctic waters. Of course, they're going to be there, right? These are places that we have are, I'm not going to say uncharted, but uncharted beneath the ocean, deep. Because there's a lot of really, really deep pockets. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about deep pockets under the ocean, thousands of feet below the ocean. And a lot of these stories that people talk about, they talk about these luminous objects, right, that are beneath the sea. And these things are like pacing next to submarines. And they're going in these impossible speeds underwater, right? You know how water, it kind of, it gives you a force behind you if you're trying to move. You can't move at those kind of speeds. So how are these craft doing it? In other words, water means nothing to this thing. And, you know, the oceans would be ideal. You know why? Because we barely explore them. There's a lot of sonar interference, so it's going to hide their movements. And then, of course, the tectonic regions where there's volcanoes, electronic magnetic anomalies, that's going to show a different signature, right? So we know that. And that's probably why that's the best place to do it, right? And, you know, why not be under there? There's probably like old lava tubes beneath our ocean, subterranean tunnels, you know, ancient structures submerged, you know, maybe before the Ice Age. It's a possibility, right? And then remember this, that our sea levels rose dramatically approximately 12,000 years ago. So, in other words, our sea levels were not to where they are today. It was less water. So this is why the coastlines where these civilizations may have been, this is why they've disappeared or they're submerged in the ocean. Because of that Younger Andreas impact, right? So if there was a civilization before that, of course if they survive, they're going to survive underground or underwater. And that's going to be the best place for these ultra-terrestrials or intraterrestrials, you know, to really hide or stay where they're not going to be seen or where they can monitor. So as we close out, let's just think about this just for a minute. You know, we were talking about ultra-terrestrials, right? I mean, are they ancient Earth beings? Are they interdimensional, like, intelligence beings of source? Or are they maybe forgotten survivors of a civilization, as we talked about Mars, the Anunnaki, things like that? Or are they guardians? Or are they manipulators? Or are they observers, right? These are the questions we have to ask of ultra-terrestrials. Or are they just something beyond our human comprehension, really in reality? Because we just do not understand them 150%. It's like the deeper we investigate the UAP phenomena, it's like the stranger our answers are becoming. Not just a spacecraft, not just the aliens, but consciousness, really, reality. You know, that's basically what it is. And now we know, as governments are slowly releasing information, you know, our military kind of becomes, they're starting to come out more and they're becoming more forward, and they're talking about ocean explorations as starting to increase a little bit more. Why? What do you think? Well, because we're questioning things more. What if they find something, right? We may discover the greatest secret of all human, history that might be there. That there's another intelligence that has always been here watching us, waiting, monitoring our civilization as it evolves. And I believe so. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Just gotta kind of stay aware a little bit, and just stay questioning of topics, of ideas, or just new things that are happening out there, and just keep looking up, man. Or look beneath the oceans, right? You might just see something. You might. A lot of things have been happening around there, right? All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast as much as I did. Hope you learned a little bit. I know I did as well. So if you guys are listening, you can listen on 26 to 28 platforms of audio podcasts, YouTube, CastBox, iPhones, iTunes, Alexa. You can ask everything. Anybody play some Alien Strand podcast. We are out there. Spotify as well. iHeartRadio, man. It's Deezer. We're everywhere. Podbean. You can even go to Patreon. Don't forget to join our Patreon. $5 a month. Please go join. You can catch some special stuff. I'm going to have a special video out tomorrow just for Patreon subscribers. You'll be able to watch my presentation tomorrow. Probably about 7:45, maybe 8:45 p.m. You'll be able to see it then, or maybe 9 o'clock by the time I get it uploaded and everything. You'll get it up there. But tomorrow it'll be on Patreon, only for Patreon members. Go join for free or join the $5 a month. I really appreciate you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast as we talked about ultradimensional beings, and I hope you got a little bit out of it and maybe just a little bit deeper dive, just think about the possibilities if we're being monitored by something else other than us. And maybe I think so. But until then, you guys have yourselves a good day, have yourselves a good evening, and have yourselves a good night.
Signal in the static, cold voice through the dark, names on the blacklist, scratched into the arc. Dust on the tape deck, late night lone desk lamp, coffee stains, old case files, maps full of pinhole stamps, footsteps in the hallway, but you live here alone. You press play anyway, let the unknown speak through the tone. Welcome to the alien strand, where the wild truth slips through your hands. Every story's drawn in the sand till it's carved in your mind, in your mind. Welcome to the alien strand. Are you ready for the questions that stand? Once you hear it, you can't go back. You're crossing that line, crossing that line. Voices over phone lines swear they've seen that sky burning silver sideways, carving through the night. Chills down your backbone when the call is saying name like they're right.
Alien Strand Podcast.
You want to learn about CE5 and extraterrestrial contact? Download my new book, now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and 14 other platforms. Book authored by Donald Ledesma. CE5, Frequencies of Contact.